Welcome to the New Peak Podcast, the show for high achievers and leaders who want to sustain performance under pressure. Here's your host, coach and author of Burnout Be Gone, Nicola McCrabbe.
Hey everyone, welcome today to the New Peak Podcast. And today I'm thrilled to have Jason Sanchez on the call with us. Welcome, Jason.
Hey, happy to be here, Nicola.
Great. Now, Jason is the VP of Engineering at the minute with Pay Shepherd. And Jason, let's tell people how I first met you. I think it was at Calgary Agile meetups.
Yep, that's correct.
How long do you think that was, Jason?
Oh, geez, that was, I'm thinking maybe a decade ago. Like it was a while.
Yes, that was a while ago, wasn't it? But I always remember talking to you, Jason. You had such passion and we had great conversations. So today we're going to be talking about leaders under pressure and how to sustain performance when we're under pressure. Now, Jason, why don't you start by giving our listeners a little preview of yourself? Who are you, Jason?
Sure. Just to give people a background, I'm a person in technology. So first I started my career off as a developer, and then I moved over to people leadership because that's where my passion is. And from there, I just sought, different opportunities, whether it's through this thing called Agile, as companies were going through Agile transformation, as well as growing companies and scaling them up with the type of culture that I felt would be beneficial to the companies.
Yeah, agile transformations, Jason, and going through change, and that's exactly what I remember you being passionate about. I think it was developing leaders in our conversations. I remember you had health check-ins way in the day when people were just starting to think about that. I remember those passionate conversations. Jason, I'm just curious, as a passionate person, what are you passionate about today?
Oh, that's a great question. I am still very passionate about fostering the right type of culture for people to thrive. And that takes a lot of shapes. They're still rooted in certain values associated with Agile, but in reality, it's about continuous growth, improvement, sustainability, which I think you would probably be, very interested in, Nicola.
Yeah.
And yeah, just basically, how do you engage people so that they come to work to do their best job every day and have fun while doing it?
Wow. That's really great. Coming to work every day. And wouldn't that be great if we all came to work every day, Jason, and had fun doing it? So I love that's what you want to do in your career, and that's what gives you purpose and meaning.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay, so let's start talking about maybe some of the earlier pressures that you led through. What was some in today's world, there's so many pressures with AI now, huh? But mergers, acquisitions, all sorts of things, so many pressures, so much change, growth, continuous developments. Do you have any examples, Jason, from your earlier days, some pressures that you had to lead through?
Absolutely. In one of my previous companies, I was there for, let's say, about 12 years, but it was interesting because in that type of space, we went through an acquisition like every other year. It was almost like a running joke that came true like every other year. And you can only imagine the type of changes that one would have to go through as an employee in such a company. There's the culture change. There's a habit of like, the big company acquisition eating a little company, and then they're kind of forcing their policies, etc., on you and the whole work culture. So that is certainly one example I can think of where we would have to consistently, like once you get established, you have to consistently change and adapt.
Wow, that's a lot, Jason, huh?
Yeah.
Consistent change and upheaval, or maybe opportunity. What were some of the strategies, Jason, that you used in those days?
Well, one of the mindsets that I've always had is that growth mindset in terms of being able to learn and adapt to what's being needed. And the other thing is, I looked at it as an opportunity, like you said, Nicola. Basically, when mergers and acquisitions can always be like, okay, yeah, there's going to be forced change on us. But I looked at it in a different way. It was more like, this is an opportunity for two companies that were completely different. How do you learn from each other?
Mhm.
And I found that very interesting. And also that, like, that's the type of mindset I went in. It's not like, okay, I'm being forced to do this. It's like, okay, what can myself and my team get value from doing this?
Mhm.
However, of course, with all of that, there's, because of all the change happening, there is a lot of work to be done as well. And that's where you have to find those types of things to how to manage the type of work
Mhm.
so that you don't burn out while still trying to, well, unfortunately, you kind of have to prove yourself as well in that situation, right? So
Yeah.
you have a sustainable type of like delivery.
So a lot of pressure, Jason, huh?
That's right.
And also trying to prove yourself that, which is a lot of internal pressures, huh? That, how do I show up and keep going? And I'm curious, what did you see in, your team, especially the capable high performers? What did you notice during those times?
That's a great question. There's a lot of people that
Mhm.
they were faced with the type of
Mhm.
change, they would lean in, right? They
Yeah.
would lean in with curiosity, and I that is a really good indicator for me. Um, when I saw that, that was a great signal. At the
Mhm.
same time, I just had to make sure that they didn't fall into a trap where they would be working or delivering at an unsustainable pace.
Yeah. Yeah. Because some people could easily fall into that trap. So how did you manage those people, Jason?
That's a great question. Now, there's other, like you mentioned the health checks before. There are
Mm,
certain indicators that I'm looking at. For example, okay, I try to give people the space to be able to work in a time that's comfortable for them, right? Because sometimes people would need some flexible time, etc. But I would always take a look at when people are doing work and how much of that is after hours. Sometimes it's due to flexibility, but I
mhm,
don't want them to feel like they need to do that just to try to keep up. That is one thing. The other part is how they show up to meetings, how do they show up back into the office, right? Because if you could see it in their face, you could see it in their energy and how they conduct themselves. A lot to come with the body language. And if something is different,
mhm.
then that's a cue for me to be, oh, why is it different? Let's start up a conversation and kind of like open the door.
That's great actually, Jason. And I love how observant you are, huh? How, not only do you observe their body language, because let's face it, when people are burning out, their body language is a bit different, huh?
That's right.
And they're kind of slumped. And not only their body language, but their attitude is quite different. But you also mentioned those health check-ins that you did years ago that we talked about in our conversations that I found so fascinating 10 years ago, even before I was into this topic. So you're noticing where people are at. You're noticing what's their body language, but you're also noticing their behaviors, their habits. Are they healthy or are they unhealthy? And how did you support them, Jason?
First, I would strike it up in a conversation. I would have regular one-to-ones with my team members, whether they reported to me or not.
Okay.
And on top of that, I just open the door and invite them to tell me how they're doing. And
Mm,
then when it's opportune, I'd be like, hey, this is a bit different from
mm,
how you normally are. Sometimes it would be burnout. Sometimes it would just be, an acute personal matter that they had to deal with, etc. But um, to be able to strike up that conversation, you need to have trust. And
yeah.
you also need to have that relationship. So it's something that
Yeah.
you have to build upon. You can't just like jump in there and be
Oh,
like, we're doing
no.
something different today. What's going on?
Yeah.
So it's all about how
Mm,
to build that relationship
yeah.
so that they know you support them.
Yes. And I think that I noticed that about you, Jason, way back. I noticed that you cared.
Yep.
You weren't often passionate, but you cared about people. And and as a leader, that's so important, isn't it? That you build up that relationship. People see that you care and they trust you. And then you can have that conversation.
Yep, absolutely. Trust is the basic fundamental building block for any relationship, as you can probably relate to,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
And in my opinion, the people that stand out in leadership positions are the ones who don't just care about outcomes, but the
Mm.
people who deliver those outcomes. So, in my opinion, it's my job to care as well.
It's your job to care. Love that. That's really good. So you talked about some of the strategies you used during times of pressure or change in your case, and that growth mindset you talked about. Is there any other frameworks or practices or habits that you applied? Like, is there any books or anything that was particularly interesting for you?
There was a book in the recent past that I had read, which reminded me of some of the things that I used as tools or
Hmm.
techniques to be able to help support myself through
Yeah.
periods of stress and burnout.
Yes.
There was one book called Give and Take by Adam Grant, and there was
Mm.
a specific chapter on maintenance and burnout, which I
Okay.
found very interesting. And some of that stuff just really stood out to me because it reminded me of what I didn't do when I burnt out,
Mm. Hmm.
and then what I continue to do to try to prevent burnout while still being high performant and having a high performant team.
Mm. And before you share some of those strategies, Jason, um, is there a is there a time that that you really had to that you struggled yourself or had to come back?
Absolutely. There, I can think of a couple of good examples
Hmm.
here. One example is when I was probably 1 or 2 years into leadership,
Hmm.
and what I like, very strongly resonate with the servant leadership model.
Mm. Yeah.
But because I was kind of a little bit newer to that at that time, that to me was take everything in for myself to own,
Okay.
right? So
Hmm.
I overburdened myself with what I could realistically help, like, have the team support me with, because I was trying to support the team by taking it on myself, and that was a
Okay.
bad pattern, right?
Yeah.
So yeah.
Mm. Thank you so much for saying that because for our listeners, there's two things you mentioned there. Being a new leader, you're trying to do the servant leadership, you're trying to be everything for them. And also, what I notice in a lot of high performers, high achievers, is they're very responsible. They take on all the responsibility themselves. They overload themselves with responsibility. And so, thank you so much for mentioning that. And so, what would you say then to people?
So one of the thing, and this is where I over-indexed on in taking on too much responsibility
Mhm.
and ownership. It's about, okay, how do you empower the team to continue to own it for their growth?
Hmm.
So it's not about you doing the work for them. It's about how you work together so that they continue to grow and all of you become more effective.
Okay. So,
So,
hmm.
sorry, that was just one example from what we had talked about. And I do have a couple more if you'd like.
Sure. So that one is about empowering them to take initiative.
Exactly. How do you share ownership and mentor them such that they can grow into completely owning it?
Okay. Okay, and that's great. So sharing ownership, I feel like that's another long conversation. But what's a couple other strategies you had, Jason?
So I found that one of the common patterns for me during burnout is that I would just be depleted, like at the
Mm.
end of the day, and it was very difficult to recover for the next day.
Yeah,
And there's this uh, there's this interesting thing about people who continue to give like that.
yeah.
If you are selfless and you get nothing out of it, you don't feel the reward of your
Mhm.
impact. You don't feel rejuvenated by it. That completely depletes your cup. I think of like your energy as a cup, right? And these are like the things that start to empty your cup naturally because we do work and there's stuff that we have to handle during the day that starts to go down. But typically in a sustainable environment, you find ways to fill that back up.
Yeah.
But once you're depleted and you start to exhibit burnout, that cup is empty and it is like you drain that much faster than you fill it up.
Yeah. And so that's a great point you make, Jason. And so then you're running on empty, huh? You're trying to keep up doing all the things you did before, but there's nothing left. And now you're just totally depleted, and that's what burnout is, huh? Your
That's
cup is beyond empty, and you're trying to keep up, so you're not being effective. All those things are showing up. And so what's the key message there, Jason?
My key message is that once you start feeling that your cup is being emptied, you have to do something about it. And there's a lot of different techniques on how you do that. You
Mm,
can change the context of how you're working or how you're giving. Um, there's another one where it's like let's say that for a developer, they're really passionate about coding, but they don't like what they're having to do at work.
yeah.
Sometimes just the context of changing that and doing something like for open source on the weekend
Mm,
actually starts to replenish them. Or let's
mm,
say there's other examples that you can do to take recharge. It doesn't mean that you just sit back and relax.
yeah.
That works for some people, but for people
Hmm.
with burnout, that might not be enough. So
Yeah.
what can you actively engage in that you're passionate about to
Mm,
fill your cup back in? It doesn't mean you sit back and relax. It means how do you do something about it to fill your cup up?
yeah, for sure. Kind of finding areas that what fills your cup
That's right.
like that. And that brings us back to Adam Grant. But I have a little book here. You can't see it.
Oh yes, so Dan Pink.
I actually have two of them. And it's the only book I have two copies of for some reason because I love this book. And did you like that book?
Absolutely. In fact, that is how I started to develop my
Hmm.
servant leadership style. Dan Pink's like whole trifecta of the autonomy, mastery, and purpose, and how that can help people like have that drive.
Yeah, which kind of ties into what you were talking about just now, giving people something to do at the weekend, something they're intrinsically motivated to do, and that intrinsic motivation. And indeed, that's part of my framework, a huge part of motivation, but getting them in tune again with something that's meaningful and interesting to them, huh?
That's absolutely it. Something that resonates with what they're interested in, something that resonates with something that gives them meaning,
Mm,
that really motivates them. That's a key part of whether it's, you're doing this for your own
yeah.
self-maintenance,
Hmm.
or more importantly, as a leader, how you understand each individual
Yeah,
well enough so that you can give them a cup filler as well.
that's it. What drives them?
Yep,
What
absolutely.
what perks them up? What gives them energy, huh?
Absolutely.
Okay, well, this has been an amazing conversation, Jason. As we leave today, I would say, is there one thing that you would like to leave our listeners with today? Remember, we were talking about how to navigate high pressure and sustain performance without burnout. Is there anything in this day and age with AI and everything out there? And what would you say to leaders? How do they do that? How do they
Okay.
sustain performance under pressure?
That's a great question. Now, what comes to mind for me is the most meaningful and most impactful for both a leader as well
Mhm.
as their team is identifying what those cup fillers are. And
Mm,
based on whether it's Dan Pink's work or anyone else's, it's about finding what intrinsically motivates individuals and how do you match that up to opportunity,
mm,
whether it's the business opportunity, whether it's an individual's growth opportunity. Find, like, I think I mentioned this to you before,
mhm.
Nicola, it's about when I consider a Venn diagram of where people are intrinsically motivated and the opportunity, whether it's like a business outcome, and how do you maximize the overlap between the two.
Yeah,
And as a leader, as well as someone who continues to try to push myself to grow, how do you find that great match?
yeah. How do you find that match, that alignment? That's a win-win for everybody.
Absolutely.
Wow, you're getting me excited now, Jason, talking about this and intrinsic motivation. That's so cool. Well, I just want to say, that's your parting words, is it, Jason?
Yeah. Well, I guess on that note, what is your cup filler? And if you're a leader, also, do you understand that about your team members? Because that will be a key unlock for you and your team.
Wow, love that key unlock for you and your team. Okay, Jason, this has been so helpful. If anybody wanted to get in contact with you, Jason, how would they do that?
Absolutely. Just look me up on LinkedIn, Jason Sanchez, and I'd be happy to get in contact with them and just have a further conversation.
Perfect. I'll put a link with our podcast as well for you, your LinkedIn, Jason. Thank you so much for the conversation today, and we'll see you soon.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, Nicola.
Take care.
Thank you for listening to the New Peak podcast. If you want help sustaining performing under pressure without burnout, head over to nicolamccrabbe.com and chat to Nicola.